An unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Right. Well, I think what I'll talk about this morning, although I wavered because when we did Fukan Zazengi as the chant, I started going, boy, maybe maybe we should circle back to that. And my arm could still be twisted in that direction, but I kind of had the intent initially that I would look at the Diamond Sutra, chapter 17, which is where we're currently at with the Thursday night group. And because that particular section of the Diamond Sutra is pretty jam-packed with some important teachings, we're going to spend several weeks kind of hanging out there. So I think that's what I'll do this morning, unless somebody would really like to do some Dogen and Fukan Zazengi. But maybe next Sunday we could do that. Yeah. So to launch us into this morning, I wanted to share with you the reading of a couple of passages, which was the way I closed out my talk Thursday night. And that was taken from a book that I just started reading these past several days, written by Bill Bryson, called The Body, A Guide to Occupants. That's sitting on the top of the stack over there. If anybody wants to pick it up afterwards and leaf through it. My only other encounter with Bill Bryson was a very pleasant one. He wrote the book Walk in the Woods about his...
I heard it. That's a name.
Yeah.
I listened to the audiobook of that. Was very
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. So he also has a real gift for dealing with scientific subject matter. And that's...
Did he do another book also? That was
he's
just
done
about
a
his,
long
like his
list.
Cabin, or just his room in his cabin in the woods?
He could have. They list all of his
But
books
he's known for
on
going
there.
into like a very microscopic look at one small thing and
Yeah.
a huge volume on it.
Yeah, yeah. And now he's chosen quite a broad topic. And early in the book, he starts making some comparisons between the physiology of our body and using DNA as the basic benchmark, and showing just to show what a marvel it is. And the first comment he made, which as soon as I read this, I said, well, I've got to incorporate this into my next talk because it ties into the Diamond Sutra teachings. And then I kept going further, and I just start writing more and more and more, and before I knew it, I had a whole page of stuff that I figured I need to I need to share with people. So that's what I'm going to do to launch into to this morning. So he begins this line of reflection by saying, you have a meter of your DNA that's packed into every cell because the DNA is so thin, you know, the way it kind of wraps up and packages in there. An entire meter of it can fit into each cell. And we have so many cells. Trillions upon trillions of cells. It means that if we took our DNA out of our body, stretched it all out into a single strand, it would stretch 10 billion miles to beyond Pluto, take us out of the solar system. Which means we are, in the most literal sense, cosmic. If you pull all that stuff out, the blueprint that we come from, it stretches that far. So it kind of is another angle to what Joni Mitchell was writing about in Woodstock. We are stardust in terms of the origins of our physical makeup, but then the blueprint stretches outside of the solar system too. So from all these different angles, Walt Whitman was right. We are vast. We contain multitudes. That's really amazing. So if the Diamond Sutra is the teachings of prajna, and prajna is the understanding of the emptiness of all things, that we are so vast we can't be, contained. These are just kind of little metaphors, scientific metaphors that help expand our consciousness to have that greater awareness. Because in our day-to-day life, we tend to become very narrow viewed. We have all these different tasks, purposes we're trying to fulfill, and that becomes our focus. So we quickly lose sight of how vast we really are. So these teachings, like the Diamond Sutra, are to hopefully make sure that we never really lose sight of that fact, that we continue to carry that awareness around within us. And I appreciate Bill Bryson using that basic fact of our DNA, our blueprint, to help convey that. The next DNA truth that he put out there called to mind for me the heart of what the Sandokai, the merging of difference and unity, is getting across, where he reminds us that all humans share 99.9% of their DNA. So that's the physiological basis of our real experience viscerally of our unity. We get that. And yet, no two humans are alike. So we have that harmony, the sameness, but yet contained within that is the uniqueness. They're both held together. Scientifically, we get that. And thanks to the prajna teachings, we can also approach that in a spiritual vein, following the guidance that Dogen gives us in Fukan Zazengi to be able to access these truths in a more direct way, which he did way before DNA was discovered, or we had any of these beautiful scientific insights, which simply serve to reinforce, what Buddhists have understood to be the case for several millennia now. And in terms of the interdependence of all things and the way things come together and work together, sticking at the cellular level, he points out another basic truth that's just mind-boggling when we direct our attention to this. The fact that our bodies are a universe of 37.2 trillion cells, give or take a few, however they arrive at that number, operating in more or less perfect concert, more or less, all the time. So the fact that we have this vast complexity that comes together, and as Anne pointed out Thursday night when I read this piece, even though, and it does that without our conscious volitional intervention at all. It's happening all the time. But we have this conceptual mind that needs to feel like it's actually in charge. It's impacting all this stuff. When the reality is, most of the time, it's just this phenomenal miracle. And of course, that's just within our body. And then it's all the environmental interactivity that comes together. And how many, just within the organic realm of that, how many, we couldn't get the number calculated. We'd need the next generation of supercomputers, and even they'd be stretched probably. If there are 37.2 trillion cells in our body, magnify that to all organic existence on this planet, how many cells does that work out to? And the way it comes together. Now, in ways that to our judgmental mind, we see a lot of conflict in there too. But the conflict is also accommodated into all of that, though. So we have this merging of sameness and difference. And in order to appreciate it, here's where I can bring Fukan Zazengi into this. It requires that we drop off our intellectual thoughts, our judging. This is right and this is wrong. This is good, this is bad. And just open ourselves to the richness. And we can come back to working with the particulars within that existence and the things that we work to try to change. But with the understanding now, with that injection of prajna, that our working to affect that is also part of this vast web. So now our sense of egoic self starts to tame down without becoming passive, though. So we continue to play an active role, but we hold ourselves a little more lightly. We don't throw the bombs out there. We're just part of this vast web, and we're trying to act for the benefit of all beings. As that beautiful, pure precept puts it so well. And supporting all these gazillion, bazillion cells throughout this vast planet, let alone the universe. And then, in terms of our interdependence, the last thing I'll share from Bill before we move on to the Diamond Sutra teachings themselves. We chanted during the service our Zen ancestry. So he gives us the more biological side to that your genes come from ancestors who most of the time weren't even human. If we trace our lineage in that fashion, some of them were fish. Lots more were tiny and furry and lived in burrows. These are our ancestors that we also should venerate. We need to go back beyond Shakyamuni Buddha. We have ancestors way before that. These are the beings from whom you have inherited your body plan. You're the product of 3 billion years of evolutionary tweaks. We began our journey through history as unicellular blobs floating about in warm, shallow seas. Everything since then has been a long and interesting accident.
That's interesting. I just sent you guys a text that came to mind when you were talking about the DNA strand, all the cells. This article I was just reading about the new CRISPR tool.
Oh yeah, the gene editor that you can go
so
in and, yeah.
That's what I was thinking. So it's by chance you just say that. Well, now we're thinking we can dip in there and make those changes ourselves and edit out disease and things like that from DNA. So it's very cool. I actually just that came to mind right away when you were talking about it.
Right. And of course, the counterpoint to that project is you don't know what other impacts that will have.
Right. Butterfly effect.
Right? Yeah. Which, whatever those impacts are, I mean,
right out of a sci-fi movie.
the vast web will accommodate it, but how we accommodate it,
Well, there's always
that's a
that
different
fear of the
story.
unknown, and then you think it's like we're meddling where we shouldn't meddle.
Right.
And then, but that's what they thought about.
Exactly.
And then
Right.
in medieval times, they
Right.
thought science was like magic.
Right.
And evil. So
Right.
You wonder. I don't know. I always try to keep an open mind, but you wonder if.
Yeah, and the other
is
where
it
that
skillful means or is it meddling?
right, and it starts off as skillful means.
Yeah.
There's no question the initial usages will be to cure disease.
But some days you might be able to make a Terminator or something down
Yeah,
there.
or
not a cyborg, but
designer babies.
Design,
So the accident that he refers to, all of a sudden we're injecting our intentionality into it, and what sort of maybe being able to create those designer babies launches us on the path of the Terminator, becoming like cyborgs. So, and these are things that are undoubtedly going to happen. I mean, if you have that technological capability, you're not going to be able to rein it in. It will happen. I mean, and of course, our Dharma brothers and sisters out at Jikoji, being right in the middle of Silicon Valley, they are very plugged into that fact that we are close to having those kinds of capabilities, and they will tell you without doubt that it will happen. It's underway already.
Yeah, Michael was sharing with me, and I didn't realize it. He a couple of years ago, because he had talked to me about it, about doing the stem cell thing on his knee, and he actually did that. And but it really didn't do much for him. He was kind of disappointed in it. Yeah.
So from that, let's circle back to the Diamond Sutra, to Dharma in language that we recognize as Dharma, but hopefully from these comments coming from the scientific realm, we can now receive these more explicit Dharma teachings with a little deeper level of understanding of them, because they're not existing in some isolated Dharma realm. I mean, the Dharma realm includes all the scientific work, all of the possibilities that loom ahead for us. It's all contained within that. So all that I've just been talking about is kind of encapsulated in this opening statement I want to put out there, that the Tathagata, the thus come one, the term that's often used to refer to the Buddha, the Tathagata. I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words when we chant into this.
I'm sorry.
No.
Am I not asking?
Absolutely.
How's it pronounced?
Tathagata.
I thought I was always pronounced Tathagata. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I've heard it said that
Yeah,
way.
well, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
we have
yeah.
different pronunciations.
yeah, I mean the most.
That's the Midwest.
Is that a new list? Okay.
Well, but it could be more, but yeah.
Definitely more. I've worked with teachers coast to coast, and
Yeah.
there are differences in the pronunciation, but by far and away the most commonly used one is Tathagata.
Tathagata.
So that's the one that I've got drilled into my head. So that's the one I'm going to use. But yeah, I mean the pronunciation. The important thing, of course, is people understand what you're saying.
Right.
We have all
I
these.
wanted to make sure you were talking about what I was thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Dharma dialects, right?
Don't get caught up.
Try not to be too thick with my dialect. So the Tathagata is the essence of all dharmas, and dharmas with a small d, which means of everything. The Tathagata is the essence. And this coming out of the Diamond Sutra, which is teaching, well, there is no essence, which is a nice fallback here. We should be clear on right at the get-go that a basic formula that's followed throughout the Diamond Sutra is because there's no essence, that's why the Tathagata is the essence of all dharmas. That you have to work through that fact that there is no essence to see that it's because of that the thus come one, suchness, is the essence of all dharmas. It's the characteristic of all things, but it's a characteristic that's no characteristic. That's why we've settled as Buddhists on the use of terms like emptiness as the descriptor. So the Tathagata is the essence of all dharmas, which leads to the next statement that there really is no dharma highest complete enlightenment for the Buddha to attain. The reason for that being that there's no gradation here. There's no highest enlightenment. As we'll chant when we close out the talk, Dharma gates are boundless, and I vow to enter them. So it's not that I'm looking for that Dharma gate that will lead me to the highest enlightenment, the Buddha's enlightenment. I need to awaken to the fact that every gate that I go through has that quality to it. That is the Tathagata, suchness, the thus come one. Thus come, meaning this physical description of the web, everything coming together to create each and every little diamond, using diamond in a different sense, that mirroring effect that we're all, because of our interdependence, we're all just thus come one. We're all Tathagata because of this vast web. So, not privileging any particular path. There is really no dharma, no single element that's the highest complete enlightenment for the Buddha to attain. All dharmas are the Buddha Dharma. You can't get outside of it. So even if we screw up totally, and life as we know it is obliterated, the next great extinction, Yeah, that is the Buddha's Dharma. It can't be defiled, a great Buddhist teaching phrase. Even though from our standpoint, it seems like, well, we're defiling an awful lot. And as I suggested before, this isn't to create a bunch of passive people that don't act to take care of all these things that we put at risk because of our understanding of this web and our interconnectedness. So that what we do can't just be from the standpoint of self-serving, that everything we do is impacting this entire web around us. So with that prajna, with that wisdom, we will, act in accordance with precepts and lead a virtuous life. Simply out of our awareness of the true nature of reality. And that we don't exist as some separate self that needs to be taken care of, apart from taking care of all other beings. So it's that basic, I'll call it common sense, at least for a large segment of the population, that, well, what's good for the whole community is also good for me. If I go in at a practical level, if there's an issue on the ballot when I go to vote, since we're at election time, to fund the local school system, well, that's not going to have any direct impact on me. My daughter's 41. There will be no grandchildren. I don't even have any nieces, nephews in the area. Nada. So my personal engagement in that would be, well, I'm not going to pay more taxes. Screw you. I'm looking out for me. But
like the
well, yeah, exactly. Right. You can always find some way.
like the Hunting Valley people.
But
Oh my God, that's amazing.
But to have that understanding that actually, we need to look at what is of benefit to all beings. And sometimes maybe it would be to disapprove an additional tax levy for schools if the money isn't being spent wisely. Maybe you come back and say, well, actually, the solution is not for more money. That the solution is we need to revamp a school board and really, buckle down. So it's not just to adapt some basic mindset that, well, I'm always going to vote for a higher tax because better schools are for the benefit of all of us. It's that skillful means thing that we talk about, of figuring out, I want for us to have a good, strong school system, even though, my personal benefit is going to be indirect. And, I'd say that even if it's 20 years from now and I'm at an age where I don't expect to be around even to get the benefit of it. It's just not part of the mix. But still, it's for the benefit of this broader community. And that is kind of the guiding light for the benefit of all beings. And to have that become our guide in terms of our day-to-day activities. Going to the ballot is a way of enacting that worldview. And it's an important one. So we definitely are engaged Buddhists if we take on this practice in a wholehearted way. And one of these beautiful ways the Diamond Sutra has of giving expression to these things, only after a bodhisattva has fully understood the Dharma of selflessness will the Tathagata say that he is a true bodhisattva. So it basically, if you understand the Dharma of selflessness, you understand there's no bodhisattva. That's the mark of the true bodhisattva. Has to go through that realization of there's no bodhisattva. The Dharma of selflessness. That's the hallmark of the true bodhisattva. And that's why the Diamond Sutra teachings are so important. If we're on this path we refer to as the bodhisattva path, this statement's telling us it has to go through the understanding of selflessness. And when you go through that, there's no bodhisattva. So you've got to give that up. And then you are the true bodhisattva. Once you can give that up, that whole notion.
So I was thinking about going to change my name to Bodhi. I can't, probably, not a good idea.
Well, sure. Just don't let it weigh you down. Don't attach to it. That's a beautiful name. Yeah. Has a nice ring to it.
I wanted to name my son that, and my ex-wife was named.
Just Bodhi.
Yeah. It was no. There was wasn't there an Olympic skier?
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so.
Yeah.
Very
That's
much
it.
so.
Name was Patrick.
That's what I was gonna say. That bank rap movie with
Point Break.
Point Break. Patrick Swayze.
Bodie Miller.
I heard that remake.
Yeah, there you go.
Might have already-
Bodhi Miller.
What, Point Break?
Yeah,
They did, yeah, a couple years ago.
That's how I have it.
So this is also it kind of sets the stage for the next statement. That in the Diamond Sutra, the Buddha is always deepening what he says. So as we work our way through the sutra, it starts to dive deeper into the truths of shunyata, of emptiness, of all things. And this analogy that gets set forth here, I love, because it's describing this as similar to the work of a master sculptor who fashions his art by the patient removal of unwanted materials. And the way that process continues. First you kind of carve out a more general outline, and then you can start to really work down to the individual details, the contours, which you can get an example of the outcome of that at the Art Museum with the Michelangelo exhibit, even though they're all drawings that are actually on exhibit, but they have some photos of some of his greatest works of sculpture, because a lot of his drawings were kind of in preparation for the construction of those works. So to see the Buddha's teachings here in a work like the Diamond Sutras being similar to the work of a sculptor, where he's carving away, and then you get a few more chapters down and he's starting to retrace territory he'd covered a few chapters ago, and now he's going deeper, until by the time you get to the end, it's you look at this final work. And of course, it's never a final work, because we carry it forward. It's what impact does it have now in 21st century America for us here?
Well, that makes me think of, the whole thing about goal, and, like what you just said, reminds us that there's like no goal. It's a goalless practice. It's just practicing,
Well, and
not attaching to that idea of attaining anything.
Because when we're trying to attain something, we've left the realm of suchness.
Right.
When we're in the realm of suchness, we're just taking care of what's right here, now. And there can't be any sense of attainment in that. You know, attainment is pointing forward to something else. And if we're dwelling as Tathagatas, as thus come ones, thus, in our thusness, our suchness, in this moment, in this set of circumstances, then there is nothing to attain other than to take care of this. And because we don't know what our taking care of this will, how that will manifest. As we know from these teachings and from, more importantly, our own experience, we don't have any control over that. We bring our intention and we care for this. And then we see where that takes us, and then we care for that. And it's just this ongoing process. You know, so when we take that bodhisattva vow of saving all beings, in the Diamond Sutra, very early on in the text is talking about, well, there are no beings to save. There's nobody to save them. It's taking that sense of possibly something to attain that's contained in that vow, and draining that out. That no, actually, you have to realize there is nobody who's going to save them, and there are no beings to save, to bring it into this realm of suchness. And I'm caring for this right now. That's to leave the realm of separate beings and enter the realm of thusness, and just constantly be caring for this situation that I find myself in right now. And that's our ongoing path. It's a practice. It's not an attainment, because it's ever ongoing. So when good women or good men commit themselves to highest complete enlightenment, they should give rise to a mind like this. I should save all sentient beings, and as I save them, I should know that there are no sentient beings to be saved. This is the Diamond Sutra. This is why people tear their hair out and say, I don't understand. Because it does truly surpass understanding. So another reason why it's great that we did Dogen's Fukan's Zengi. We have to set aside that mind. It requires Dogen's Zazen mind to really dive into a text like the Diamond Sutra and receive it. And to be able then to practice it. Because if we're trying to figure it out, it defies that level of understanding. You would miss it completely. It's not about understanding in that kind of intellectual way. Can't do it. So our intellect, because of our ability to understand language, which is the vehicle that the Diamond Sutra is conveyed in, our intellect has a role to play, but then it can't get us all the way there. We have to be willing to move beyond. And, so in Christianity, Kierkegaard would call that the leap of faith. And there's an element of truth in that for our practice as well. But not to completely sever ties with the intellect, because the intellect can be a very helpful thing too. Otherwise we could go off go down some pretty interesting, bizarre roads. So it's always good to have the intellect come along afterwards and take a more reasoned look at it. And when the intellect does that, we can look at it in terms like the scientific analogies I started this talk with. Well, how does that really play out? And in particular areas, the intellect is beautiful at that. And if it doesn't play out that way, let's see. Then we really need to hit the pause button, because this practice has to stand up to that kind of scrutiny, or it should be getting discussed, and we should start to feel some discomfort about it. It's got to hold up under that level of scrutiny, but that scrutiny isn't what's going to get us to that ultimate, spiritual understanding. We have to go beyond it, and then, it's still always going to be part of our makeup. So it's not that when we let it go, it's not that we're just like cutting out portions of our physiological makeup, say lobes of the brain or whatever that might look like, to be able to cut that all out. It's not what we're doing here. We're actually including more. So we're dropping off our limitations to open ourselves up to a vaster view of things, which is kind of what's required by living in suchness, because suchness is containing everything, which is why we can never intellectually get it. But we can get the basic contours of it, but we'll never get it in that definitive, particular fashion. So we just have to carry that general outline with us at all times, that basic understanding, and use that to work with the particularities. Because we can't even see the particularities broadly enough to see what the outcome is going to be. We don't know what the implementation of something like CRISPR will lead to. Even our greatest scientific minds, we don't know. So it's wise to have some caution, some trepidation there. But what we do know, and this is the Buddhism in science, is that it goes beyond what we can conceive of. That we can't see with a certainty all the implications of it. And there's great prajna there that we need to listen to, be aware of, and take care of. That much we need to do. And it's important that a large segment of the scientific population bring that to this process that we're already engaged in, and we're going to continue on the path of it, no question.
I think of my friend Charles, who has done research on rheumatoid arthritis, pretty much like probably 30, 40 years a case, and he always says, don't get attached to what you've discovered, because it's, no. The flow.
So this statement that I just gave coming out of the Diamond Sutra, that I should save all sentient beings, and as I save them, I should know that there are no sentient beings to be saved, is pulling together these two aspects of our practice, wisdom and compassion. So that I should save all sentient beings, of course, is compassion. That's our active practice of it. But As I save them, that I should know that there are no sentient beings to be saved. That's wisdom. And that's it's vital that both of those come together, that we can't have one operating without the other.
It's kind of gift giver.
Yeah,
receiver,
exactly. The emptiness of the three
You
wheels.
are, yeah,
Right.
you're giving a gift, you're receiving at the same time. Where you're saving sentient beings, you're benefiting at the same time.
Right. 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 Because otherwise, you know, the one who's saving all sentient beings, you know, becomes now the savior complex. We're into the world of Pete Townsend's Tom here. And the saviors of the world, you know, that's a lucrative path to be on, no question. But so the humility of spiritual practice, which is, I think, one of the hallmarks, actually, is to be able to maintain that aspect of the practice. To bring that, combined with deep understanding, wisdom, is at least speaking from my own standpoint, that was one of the things that I found very appealing about Buddhism. And that I also find appealing about significant segments of other traditions. I mean, within Christianity, there are plenty of examples of that. So it's not something that I find that being unique to Buddhism. But for me, at least, that's kind of like a beacon calling out, of a beacon of authenticity. And contained within that is really this sense of knowing that there are no sentient beings to be saved. And we can phrase that in different ways, but what it's ultimately saying is there is no ultimate attainment here, because there's no point of differentiation. The emptiness of the three wheels. There's no savior. There's no person being saved. Because once we enter into that realm, now, you know, we're in the competitive marketplace. You know, which path is saving more beings? And the mega church, oh, they're saving lots of beings. I mean, it becomes a problem. And then that just kind of feeds upon itself once we start down that path. So that is, I think, the importance of this basic understanding being conveyed by the Diamond Sutra. That we should save all sentient beings, and as we're saving them, know that there are no sentient beings to be saved. The compassion, the wisdom. And as the Diamond Sutra brings them together in what I find to be a very helpful way, the practice of compassion and the paramita of generosity. They're kind of very closely intertwined, different ways of describing the same basic phenomenon. To be generous is to be compassionate. And to be generous as the perfection of generosity is to be in that realm of the emptiness of those three wheels. Otherwise, we're being generous because I'm being generous to somebody else, and that kind of puts me, I'm the giver, they're the receiver, and we get caught up in that. No, it's just the pure generosity is just that generosity of nature, of true nature. True nature is being generous. And the rest of it is fabrication, mind. And will lead us from the practice of generosity, actually.
I just think it's interesting when we go to the Orchid orchestra and how they list the donations, and they have the categories of the amounts.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like,
Well, yeah.
so does somebody give like 500, like $1 over, so they get in the next category? It's just kind of,
Hey,
it's differentiating.
if
Yeah.
you're in the fundraising business, that's
Oh, sure, sure, yeah,
Powerful incentive.
yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. It's just kind of,
But and the fact that generosity plays such a significant role in the teachings of the Diamond Sutra also points to the fact that it's kind of like the front line for wisdom. That generosity, compassion, is the lead here, and then wisdom follows. So it calls to mind for me the line from the Metta Sutta about being wise but not puffed up. I think when wisdom is following compassion and generosity, you're going to have wisdom without being puffed up. Whereas if it's not, if it's the other way around, well, no. No, it could get puffed up quite easily. So another, I think, interesting way of seeing the Buddha as combining these two traits of the mystic and the practitioner. Yeah, the practitioner being his role kind of as the doctor, the psychologist. And the mystic, last week we looked at the Sambhogakaya, the bliss body, this special place we enter through this practice of realizing our oneness with all beings. So that mystic and practitioner is, prajna and compassion. That we don't just go off and try to stay in our blissful state, and that the other piece to it is just never enters into the equation. That the whole purpose would be to get these blissful states. Yeah, the whole purpose is to be awake in each moment, in the suchness of each moment. So I think that's probably a good place to stop off. And may our intention equally penetrate every being and place with the true merit of Buddha's way. Beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable, I vow to become it.